Few artifacts in the realm of horror carry the same weight of dread and fascination as the Necronomicon, a sinister book whose very pages are said to be stained with madness and death. First birthed from the twisted imagination of H.P. Lovecraft, this fabled tome has since transcended literature, making its way into the nightmares of horror cinema. He even encouraged other writers to weave it into their own stories, which is how it became such a staple of horror culture. Over time, the Necronomicon has come to represent pure evil, symbolizing the dark forces that lurk in the supernatural and the unknown origins of our universe. Its malevolent influence has shaped countless stories, serving as both a gateway to unspeakable horrors and a harbinger of chaos for those who dare to open it. From ancient curses to the summoning of unspeakable entities, the Necronomicon's presence only amplifies the fear, often sealing the doom of its readers. Many films have featured the Necronomicon in some way, but in this list, we will only cover the book's appearances in films that left quite an imprint on pop culture. Today, we will be delving into 11 of the most spine-chilling films that feature the Necronomicon, each offering its own twist on the book's terrifying power. Whether it's the relentless hopelessness of the Evil Dead franchise or the cosmic dread of Lovecraftian adaptations, the Necronomicon's appearances are guaranteed to send shivers down your spine. So stick around as we explore how this cursed book elevates the terror in these iconic horror films. Without further ado, let's get right to it. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The Dunwich Horror, 1970. This Roger Corman-produced 1970 film, The Dunwich Horror, directed by Daniel Haller, stars former child star Sandra Dee as a virgin college student who unknowingly becomes the target of an ancient cult where she is manipulated by a seemingly innocent guy named Wilbur Whately. The main goal of this cult is to use her in a sacrificial ritual tied to the Necronomicon, the infamous Book of the Dead, in order to summon the terrifying Old Ones. The story is mainly about Dean Stockwell as Wilbur Whately, rocking an afro and giving off major sinister Disco King vibes. He shows up at Miskatonic University, hoping to borrow the original Necronomicon, but nobody knows that he is the grandson of a powerful wizard and the illegitimate son of a woman who is now spending her days in a padded cell. A naive Sandra Dee, with her massive blonde hairdo, tags along with Wilbur to his creepy farmhouse, where she is quickly drugged. Things take a bizarre turn as she starts talking about sex while having alter-side hallucinations, and begins dreaming about strange, out-of-the-world cult-like figures chasing her along misty sea cliffs. When her suspicious friends show up to rescue her from her unsettling new boyfriend and his unfortunate perm, they find that Sandra has no interest in being saved. But as they dig deeper, they uncover some horrifying truths about Wilbur, including the fact that he has a twin brother, and their father might just be something straight out of a mutant seafood nightmare. There are some genuinely creepy moments in this film, with the atmosphere being as thick and unsettling as the fog rolling along the coastline near Wilbur's house. While we don't see much of Wilbur's twin brother, the blood-red POV shots add a nice touch of suspense. Dean Stockwell gives a seriously unsettling performance as the not-quite-human Wilbur, who successfully manages to seduce innocent Sandy, quickly shattering her good girl image. The ending feels a bit rushed and borders on silly, but everything leading up to it is tense and well executed. Given it's one of the earlier Lovecraftian adaptations, there's minimal gore, but the haunting sound effects and overall vibe keep the tension high throughout. While the Dunwich Horror never got any glowing reviews, it did contribute to the Necronomicon's growing place in pop culture. Despite its obvious 1970s flair, there is something oddly creepy and charming about it. Even if it's not the most polished film, it is worth a watch, especially if you're curious about the dark power of the Necronomicon and what can happen when it's in the hands of someone bent on unleashing chaos. What makes the Dunwich Horror stand out is how faithful it is to H.P. Lovecraft's original story, staying true to both the time period and key detail. The film's psychedelic visuals really add to its eerie, atmospheric vibe, making it a hidden gem for Lovecraft fans. And if you're into horror films with memorable endings, this one definitely delivers.
I have often wondered if the majority of mankind ever paused to reflect.
Out of Mind, The Stories of H.P. Lovecraft, 1998. Out of Mind tells the fictional story of a young man in 1998 who inherits a strange book from his late uncle. And yes, it's the Necronomicon. As he digs deeper into its mystery, he begins to experience vivid, terrifying dreams of a past life set in the 1910s and 1920s. People he knows in his real life start appearing in these nightmares, but in unfamiliar roles. As the dreams intensify, the line between nightmare and reality blurs, and the horror creeps into his waking world. Eventually, he comes face to face with the man himself, H.P. Lovecraft. But as the story unfolds, it's clear that at least one of them is trapped in a dream. While the film references and plays around with elements from Lovecraft's works and the larger mythos, it also focuses on Lovecraft himself. The actor who portrays the writer even does a mock radio broadcast using Lovecraft's actual words from his letters and his fictional stories. It cleverly explores both the mythos and the man who is behind creating it all. The film adapts several of H.P. Lovecraft's stories while blending in some surprisingly realistic footage of H.P. Lovecraft exploring his motivations, why he wrote, and what he thought of his own work, all while weaving in elements from his stories, especially the Dreamlands tales featuring Randolph Carter. It might sound a bit hokey, but it actually works. Through the Dreamlands, the film cleverly mixes modern-day life with Lovecraft's 1920s world. In one fun, memorable scene, Lovecraft even meets a modern fan and is baffled to see his face on a t-shirt. Having watched a lot of H.P. Lovecraft-inspired films, I can honestly say this one was one of the most enjoyable. It brought Lovecraft to life in a believable, respectful, and even moving way. But the only downside was the monstrous special effects, which came off as a bit too campy for this kind of film. They could have been done better, or just left out entirely by letting the imagination take over. But aside from that, it was great to see how the film mixed name-dropping and time-bending in a way that really captured Lovecraft's style while remaining mysterious, suspenseful, and slowly revealing cosmic horror beneath it all. So if you're a fan of Lovecraft's work and not just into the ultra-gory, over-the-top films like Reanimator and From Beyond, you will definitely enjoy this movie. The Evil Dead franchise. Sure, we all know the Evil Dead franchise includes 4 movies, TV series, and various crossover films and comic books, but for this list, we are counting it as one cohesive unit. When it comes to the Necronomicon, the main focus is on the 4 feature films and the television series. This supernatural horror franchise, created by Sam Raimi, centers around the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, an ancient Sumerian text that methodically targets and possesses its victim. So let's talk about the Necronomicon part in the Evil Dead franchise, starting with the original. The Evil Dead, 1981. It all kicks off in the first film, where a group of teenagers heads to a cabin for a weekend getaway. The Necronomicon Ex Mortis is the ultimate source of all evil in the Evil Dead films, and is one of the most crucial elements of the entire series. Bound in human flesh and written in blood, this text, drawing inspiration from H.P. Lovecraft, serves as a gateway for ancient demonic entities to invade the human world. Reading from it unleashes dark forces that roam the mortal plane, seeking out living beings to possess and corrupt. In the Evil Dead universe, the book seems particularly focused on Deadites or Kandarian demons, who lurk in dark forests, like the one Ash and his friends stumble into in the original film. The Necronomicon is easily recognizable by its distinct face on the cover, which evolves over time. Since its introduction in the series' first installment, the Necronomicon has remained a key part of the Evil Dead franchise ever since. Evil Dead 2. In the original Evil Dead, Ash destroys the Necronomicon to save himself from the Deadites that have killed and possessed his friends. However, in Evil Dead 2, we see a new Necronomicon that looks very similar to the first. Interestingly, this book does not get destroyed in what is essentially a quasi-sequel that also acts as a remake of the first film. Instead, it gets sucked into a time warp that connects the film to Army of Darkness, taking Ash along to medieval times. Evil Dead 2 also expands the series' lore by suggesting that there are multiple copies of the Necronomicon out there. In the introduction to Evil Dead 2, Professor Nobi talks about the Necronomicon Ex Mortis in his tape recordings, but also mentions something called the Naturum Demonto. Many films have interpreted this to mean that the Necronomicon in Army of Darkness and Ash vs. the Evil Dead is actually the larger, complete version, while the other books are like chapters that can still wreak havoc on anyone who encounters them. Army of Darkness, 1992. When Ash is transported back to 1300 AD in Army of Darkness, his main goal is to find the Necronomicon. If he can locate it and present it to the wise man, then he would finally be able to return back to his own time. However, during his quest, Ash discovers 3 different Necronomicon books in a graveyard, each possessing its own mystical powers. Initially, he thinks that only one of these books is the true Necronomicon, but later, Evil Dead Rise clarifies that each of them is a separate volume. This explains why we see different versions of the Necronomicon throughout the Evil Dead trilogy, the Ash vs. Evil Dead series, the 2013 Evil Dead remake, and ultimately, Evil Dead Rise. There could even be more variations out there, leaving the door open for future expansions of the franchise. Ash vs. Evil Dead, 2015 to 2018. In the Ash vs. Evil Dead series, the Necronomicon serves as the source of Deadite-related chaos across the country and is closely tied to Ash Williams' fate. However, this is not the same book that transported Ash back to the modern world in the Army of Darkness. This version of the Book of the Dead has a certain unique look that sets it apart, because not only does it have a face on its cover, but it also has an ear on its back. The rough design of the jacket gives it a worn, aged appearance that mirrors Ash's own wear and tear from years of battling terrifying creatures. Unfortunately, the series was cancelled before it could wrap up its story, leaving the fate of this Necronomicon in limbo. Because of its size and significance, many fans consider it to be the complete version, much like the one featured in Army of Darkness. Evil Dead 2013. In the Evil Dead remake, the Necronomicon is referred to as the Naturum Demonto, which gives it quite a twist while still sharing many characteristics with other versions of the Book of the Dead. This particular book is bound in human flesh, but it looks like it's stitched together from various pieces of skin, making it noticeably larger than the others. In the film, Mia and her friends head to a remote cabin in the woods, where they unwittingly use the book to awaken a dangerous entity known as the Abomination. This entity requires 5 souls to be fully reborn, marking a departure from the original trilogy, where the main threat came from the Kandarian demon. Even though Mia thinks she has destroyed the book by burning down the cabin at the end of the film, in a chilling twist, the book is shown lying on the grass in the final scene, suggesting that its dark influence might still linger. Evil Dead Rise 2023. In Evil Dead Rise, the Necronomicon is discovered buried in a bank vault beneath an apartment complex, accompanied by vinyl recordings of its passages. This version of the book shares some similarities with the one from the Evil Dead remake, featuring a binding with veins instead of stitches and pin-like teeth that hold it shut. When the book is opened, we see dark forces possessing a young mother and pushing her to put her children in grave danger. While her loved ones consider killing her to stop the evil, they overlook the need to destroy the book itself, allowing it to remain in the apartment complex to lure in more victims in the future. What makes the Necronomicon in Evil Dead Rise particularly interesting is the insight provided by its recorded passages. One line reveals that the Deadites thrive on chaos and disorder, preferring to create an environment of suffering through torture rather than simply disposing of their victims quickly. This explanation enriches the Evil Dead universe, offering clarity to the erratic behavior of Deadites in the earlier films that lacked a concrete rationale. Not alone. Necronomicon, Book of the Dead, 1994. This film brings together 3 chilling Lovecraft tales in an anthology format, directed by 3 different directors. The premise has Lovecraft himself searching an old library for the legendary Necronomicon, the Book of the Dead. As he copies stories from the book, guarded by monks, we see how the tales come to life on screen. The first segment, The Drowned, is directed by Christoph Gans and stands out as one of the best cinematic interpretations of Lovecraft's work. It follows a man who inherits a crumbling mansion from his uncle, only to discover its dark secrets. The special effects are impressive, and the strange, decrepit mansion sets a perfect, foreboding tone. Plus, there's a cameo from one of the great old ones, which is a real treat for Lovecraft fans. Unfortunately, the second story, The Cold, falls short. In this story, we meet a scientist with an unsettling condition where he simply can't tolerate warmth. While David Warner does a fantastic job portraying the man suffering from an inability to tolerate the heat due to his experiments, the segment drags with dull dialogue and a lack lackluster plot. Still, it is better than most Lovecraftian horrors out there. Now, the final tale, Whispers, is much more graphic, filled with dismemberments and body parts in an underground butcher's lair. It follows two police officers who encounter a terrifying resident from a horrifying underground community. The catacombs are suitably creepy, and the monsters are terrifying, but the writing is truly commendable. Signe Coleman's portrayal of the cop, Sarah, comes off pretty campy though, with her constant screaming and frantic behavior. Overall, Necronomicon Book of the Dead is a decent watch, especially for those who enjoy the gore within Lovecraftian themes. Each story delivers its own unique brand of horror, offering a glimpse into Lovecraft's eerie and unsettling world. Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, 1993. In Jason Goes to Hell, the 9th chapter of the Friday the 13th franchise, we get another look at everyone's favorite supernatural slasher, Jason Voorhees. This time, Jason returns from the dead by possessing the body of a medical coroner, proving once again that no one can escape the curse of Camp Crystal Lake, even after his death. This is hands down one of my favorites in the Friday the 13th franchise, as it kicks off with Jason going after an undercover FBI agent whose shoes magically change during a chase through the woods, before he's blown to pieces in the most spectacular, over-the-top way possible within the first 15 minutes of the film. Then, during the autopsy, the doctor gets lured into eating Jason's black heart, which sets off a crazy series of body-swapping scenes. In this film, Jason's more of a demon parasite, hopping from body to body while trying to find a family member so he can become whole again. Sure, it is a bit goofy, with some unintentional laughs here and there, but who cares? It's gory, it's entertaining, and it delivers some of the best kills in the series. In fact, the tent split scene is one of the greatest kills in any slasher movie ever, and you've got to watch the unrated cut to really appreciate it. What's especially interesting about this movie is the crossover with Sam Raimi's Evil Dead franchise, as the Necronomicon and the Kandarian dagger make a brief appearance, hinting at a connection between the two universes. Director Adam Marcus later confirmed that Jason Voorhees is actually a Deadite, because his mother made a deal with the devil to resurrect him. This revelation added a whole new layer to Jason's undead nature, tying him to the dark, demonic forces from the Evil Dead world. As a horror fan, it's hard not to love the nods to other films and the way this movie expands the horror universe. From the Halloween references to the Necronomicon making Jason an official Deadite, and of course, Freddy's glove dragging his mask into hell, it's all just a wild, bloody, and insanely fun ride.
Enough's enough. I've gone along with this one.
Cast a Deadly Spell, 1991. A Roger Rabbit-inspired 1940s Hollywood noir film universe with H.P. Lovecraft's Ancient Ones, magic, monsters, and starring Fred Ward and Julianne Moore? How is this movie not talked about more often? Well, let's change that. Set in 1948 Los Angeles, Private Detective H. Philip Lovecraft is one of the few people in town who does not dabble in magic. Instead, he sticks to good old-fashioned street smarts with his fists and a gun. Eventually, he's hired by Amos Hackshaw to track down Larry Willis, a chauffeur who has made off with the infamous Necronomicon. What follows is a twisted mystery of dark magic and ancient horrors that will make you wonder why this hidden gem is not getting the hype it deserves. Of course, as these films go, the plot is not that straightforward. In the mix, you've got the seemingly innocent Olivia Hacksaw, who is the heart of a much bigger and more sinister plan. And then there's Connie Stone, Lovecraft's old flame, who's got her own hidden agenda. The cast is full of recognizable faces like Clancy Brown, Charles Hallahan, and Arnisha Walker, who plays a witch that helps Lovecraft. Plus, there's Kurt Sobel, who not only appears as the band leader, but also won an Emmy for his song Why Do I Lie, featured in the film. It's a wild noir meets magic sort of ride. Director Martin Campbell really made this film look and feel bigger than your typical TV movie. It's got a cinematic quality that would have worked perfectly as an HBO series, especially before the network became known for cranking out shows like they do now. The special effects are spot on too, giving it that distinct 90s direct-to-video vibe in the best way possible. Although HBO did create a sort of spiritual sequel called Witch Hunt, where Dennis Hopper stepped in for Fred Ward's Lovecraft, and the setting shifted to 1953. In that film, magic took the place of communism as the underlying threat, which is a pretty creative twist. Color Out of Space, 2019. Color Out of Space is loosely based on H.P. Lovecraft's short story and might just be the most successful adaptation of his work to date. It's not that Lovecraft's stories lack quality, but rather that it's incredibly difficult to fully capture or replicate the sense of cosmic horror he is known for on screen. So this one might be the closest we've gotten to a true Lovecraft adaptation, even with the complicated legacy of its creator hanging over it. While the movie doesn't follow Lovecraft's original story to the letter, it nails the unsettling essence of his cosmic horror. The film centers around a remote farm where a mysterious meteorite crashes, triggering a series of terrifying events for the family living there. As the strange happenings escalate, there's a growing sense that the horror won't just stay confined to the farm and could spread far beyond. Color Out of Space brings together a post-Mandy Nicolas Cage, strange lighting, and surreal practical effects created by Arrow podcast co-host Dan Martin. It stays impressively true to the original story, so much so that you can almost imagine the exclamation marks popping up on the screen. At the heart of this Lovecraftian masterpiece is a chilling, otherworldly menace, and the film's unsettling purple hues create a certain vibe that's uniquely its own. Color Out of Space focuses on Nathan Gardner, the father of a family that relocates to a remote farm, only to find themselves at the epicenter of a cosmic disturbance so intense that they can't even trust the color of the sky. The film is beautiful, strange, tense, and tragic, thus making it arguably the best modern adaptation of Lovecraft's work. Its nostalgic tone gives it an 80s feel, reminiscent of many classic titles from that era. While its legacy has faced some challenges to allegations against its director, if you can set aside the creator's controversies, and as a Lovecraft fan, you're probably pretty good at that, there's still so much here to appreciate and be inspired by.
What's going on here? But we gotta get out of here.
You come any closer, I'll kill you!
The Unnameable, 1988. While H.P. Lovecraft's short story The Unnameable, made by the then first-time writer-director Jean-Paul Ouellette, did not reach the heights of classics like Reanimator, From Beyond, or Necronomicon, Ouellette successfully crafts a twisted gothic monster tale filled with a menacing atmosphere and a surprising amount of blood and gore. I was genuinely impressed by how well the effects were done for its time, and the demon design is incredibly creative. Special effects and makeup artists R. Christopher Biggs and Camille Calvé did a fantastic job, and their impressive resumes speak to their skill and professionalism. While the film is graphic and features some unsettling howling sound effects, the supernatural setup feels fairly conventional. There's not much exploration of the backstory, and the climax arrives rather abruptly. The 90-minute runtime moves along quickly thanks to tight editing and the rough, creaky atmosphere to enhance the gritty touch. According to legend, Joshua Winthrop kept his demon child locked away in his family's house after being ashamed of what he had created and calling it the Unnameable. In his attempts to hide the creature, it eventually turns on him and brutally murders him. Now, fast forward to the present day of the film, where a group of students from nearby Miskatonic College decides to spend the night in the supposedly old, abandoned, and haunted house that is rumored to have once been home to a hideous creature. When they realize that the creature actually exists, their only chance of survival rests on the open-mindedness of Randolph Carter. Mark Kinsey Stevenson brings a bold, self-assured energy to the role of Randolph Carter, and even though he doesn't have a lot of screen time, his presence is always felt. Back in the late 80s, Lovecraft was riding on top of the horror genre, so there's probably more of where this came from. However, the film stretches its runtime with a lot of aimless wandering around the spooky house by the characters, which can feel a bit tedious. While the filler material can be pretty dull, director Jean-Paul Ouellette occasionally spices things up with some gnarly gore, like a juicy torn throat and a mangled body crashing to the floor with brains spilling out. There is also a bit of nudity with Laura Albert as freshman hottie Wendy, which keeps the audience engaged right up until the big monster reveal. And let me tell you, the creature looks way better than I expected after being hidden for so long. With its vicious fangs, wings, horns, and even a pair of stylish cloven Ugg boots, it's a creepy sight that definitely makes the wait worthwhile. In a fun twist at the end, Randolph Carter starts reading from the Necronomicon, which just happens to be lying around the house, and his incantations summon tree spirits that help defeat the monster, giving his fellow students, Howard Damon and Tanya Heller, a chance to escape the house.
A storyteller that you have put your complete trust in.
The Theater Bizaar, 2011. This horror anthology dives into a collection of bizarre and chilling tales, blending elements of spiraling insanity with supernatural intrigue. The Theater Bizaar features an impressive lineup with 7 directors, 9 screenwriters, and 19 producers, making it a true horror anthology. The film consists of 6 short stories framed by a wraparound segment. However, as a whole, it feels a bit like a grotesque monster cobbled together from mismatched parts, as the individual segments often fall flat, resembling decayed remnants from long-gone subjects. The framing subjects of the Theater Bizaar unfold like live stage performances in an abandoned theater. The only audience member is a troubled young woman living in an apartment across the street, her bedroom walls plastered with cut-up and tattered theater memorabilia. On stage, actors are caked in bizarre makeup, giving them a doll-like appearance, and their stiff movements are accompanied by a barrage of mechanical sound effects. The MC delivers a series of nonsensical musings about stories and storytellers, gradually appearing more natural as the short films progress. In contrast, the young woman in the audience becomes increasingly unsettling in her appearance. While the visual creativity of these wraparound segments is striking, they fail to establish a meaningful connection between the individual stories and mainly serve as a spectacle to behold. The story follows Enola Penny, who becomes captivated by what seems to be an old abandoned theater. Driven by her impulsive curiosity, she sneaks inside one night and discovers a performance that takes her by surprise. While all stories have their own unique twists, one segment called Mother of Toads stands out. This particular tale is loosely inspired by a story from Clark Ashton Smith, a contemporary of H.P. Lovecraft. Smith's works often referenced the Necronomicon, and this story is no exception. This standout piece really shines through the darkness and ends up being honest, thought-provoking, and surprisingly poignant, tackling the darker sides of life with genuine dignity. It serves as the emotional heart of the film, a beautifully preserved tale harvested from a good source, standing out as a fresh specimen amid the rest of the collection. Haunted Palace, 1963. Roger Corman is best known for his adaptations of Edgar Allan Poe's works in the early 1960s, but in The Haunted Palace, he shifts his focus to another master of horror, H.P. Lovecraft. This film delivers a chilling and atmospheric experience. A standout element is Vincent Price's performance as the lead character, who masterfully portrays a tormented hero who succumbs to a dark ancestral curse, subtly conveying his gradual slide into evil. Even when the film hits a few slow patches, we can always count on Price to captivate us until the action picks up again. Centuries ago, Joseph Curwen is burned at the stake by the people of Arkham for witchcraft, after he is caught abducting women from the local village and using them as a subject of experiments in his castle from the Necronomicon. In his final moments, he vows to take revenge by cursing them, and as a result, the generations that follow are haunted by the birth of disfigured mutants within their family. Fast forward over a century, and Charles Dexter Ward, another character portrayed by Price, returns to Arkham with his beautiful wife Anne to claim his inheritance at the Curwen Castle. Right from the start, the villagers are suspicious of Charles, especially since he bears a striking resemblance to his infamous great-grandfather. Plus, his face is the constant reminder of Curwen's dark legacy, in the form of the cursed mutants living nearby. But Charles and Anne dismiss these supernatural tales and decide to settle into their new home, encouraged by the castle's caretaker, Simon. However, it soon becomes clear that Simon has his own motives for wanting them to stay. As time goes on, Charles starts to behave increasingly oddly, and it becomes evident that Joseph Curwen's spirit has possessed it. After a century of waiting, Curwen is finally ready to exact his terrible revenge on the villagers who condemned him. Despite its limited budget and rushed filming schedule, Corman manages to create some genuinely creepy visuals. The story is filled with swirling fog, creaking doors, cobweb-covered corridors, and disorienting shadows, all contributing to a sustained atmosphere of dread. Daniel Haller deserves credit for his effective art direction, which portrays a believable period village steeped in fear and secrecy. The film itself is straightforward, and many viewers will likely catch on to the twists long before the characters do. However, it is important to remember that this film was made in 1963, when its plot twists and shocking moments probably gave audiences quite a fright. Even nearly 50 years years later, the film's eerie mood still has the power to unsettle. Overall, The Haunted Palace is a solid classic horror film and a nostalgic experience for anyone who misses the style of old-school screamers. Call Girl of Cthulhu, 2014. Directed by Chris LaMartina and co-written with Jimmy George, Call Girl of Cthulhu follows a young, innocent man named Carter who is on the hunt for the right girl and thinks he has found her in Riley, a prostitute with a distinctive birthmark on her right butt cheek. However, Riley is being pursued by the Church of Starry Wisdom, who believe that her birthmark signifies that she will become the bride of the elder god Cthulhu, a terrifying entity lurking beyond the Wall of Sleep. As Carter navigates his feelings for Riley, he must figure out how to find true love, or maybe lust, without losing his sanity to the monstrous creature that should not exist. Beyond being a tribute to H.P. Lovecraft, this movie dives headfirst into a wild mix of gore, sexploitation, and a fearless approach to its theme. It pushes boundaries with outrageous scenes, like a golden shower that literally melts a man's face off, monstrous male genitals, and tentacle moments that you absolutely will not forget. Watching it feels like the cast is still discovering makeup, goop, and gunk stuck to them years later from all the chaotic filming. What starts off as a lighthearted film takes a surprisingly dark and emotional turn. I was genuinely surprised by how much I enjoyed this movie, especially since I kept expecting it to fall apart. But that's when it hit me that LaMartina and George really know what they're doing when it comes to filmmaking, and their talent is no accident. So that was our list of some brilliant Necronomicon-influenced horrors you must watch at least once in your life. What are your top 3 picks from this video? Let us know about your thoughts in the comment box below. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.